the Shatter of Worlds or Universes Godzilla in this show that you probably wouldn't even think to watch. If I was to tell you that there's a Godzilla out there that has a lot of similarities to Darkseid, you know, the guy from DC Comics, this is a different universe than Godzilla universe stuff, but I'm just saying they have similarities, and that there's a Godzilla that has similarities to aspects of Darkseid, you know, due to the abstractness of his being a god outside of space and time, abstract centric type being type stuff. Because you know how DC has like a vast multiverse, right? And you know outside of space and time, that's where Apocalypse is. No, I'm talking about Darkseid's true form being outside of space and time on his throne on Apocalypse. And he has to make little baby avatars of himself to even fit in this tiny universe. His true glory and true might can't fit in there, so he has to make little baby version clones of himself that has his essence. And he works through that to fit in these different universes. And it's a different Darkseid in different universes, but the real one's out here outside of space and time. You know, because God forbid if his true form was to actually set foot in the actual multiverse, the multiverse itself wouldn't be able to handle it. Yeah, it's hard to believe that somebody can be so big to where they're just stepping in our universe or universes and our world can't perceive their glory. Like it's even talked about here when he reconstituted himself into his true form, like those were the past fights these beings had to fight was like weaker aspects, past aspects of himself. And his true self will literally fall over everything in the multiverse. A gigantic shadow cast across the multiverse. This is the kind of stuff cosmic beings can do in Marvel and DC. This is the same similar concept with this Godzilla I'm going to talk about in this video. I'm just using Marvel and DC as a good example of this stuff because they like seem like they're OGs when it comes to this type of cosmic being type stuff. Like, there's this thing known as living ideas, the concept of the universe itself, the concept of infinity, the concept of love. Like, Marvel does this type of stuff too. These higher beings have to make manifestations of themselves for their glory to even fit in our universes. Like, in Marvel, they call it embodies, manifestation bodies. In Marvel, for example, like, this is an easy way to understand it. The universe itself is actually alive, right? Eternity is the living embodiment of the universe itself. But this is an oversimplification because eternity is technically the living embodiment of the multiverse itself, like a multiversal eternity. Like there's one true multiversal eternity where it encompasses all of the Marvel multiverse. Like that's literally the living embodiment of the multiverse itself, but then it has to make manifestations of itself in different universes, which is one could say like extensions of itself, is extensions of its true form, but it's like contained within one universe instead of just being multiversal eternity. If that makes sense to you, does that make sense to you? Manifestation bodies. It's like you're talking to a different clone that didn't go through that different. Like if you say, hey, to this one, and then you say, do you remember that time we ate a cheeseburger together? This one's gonna be like, wait a minute, what? You ate a cheeseburger with this one over here. So this one don't know what you're talking about. You see what I'm saying? But this one does because it's the multiverse eternity. It's all of them. I mean, you got all kinds of cosmic beings. You got beings that are literally the living, literal embodiment of infinity, who's also a cosmic being with all the other abstracts. There was this character that said, do you remember me? They said, I'm looking for eternity, not one of his manifestation bodies, but the real thing. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about eternity. This same concept applies for other cosmic abstract beings like infinity. And you remember how I said, just because you have a conversation with one abstract, that doesn't mean the other abstracts want to know what you're talking about because there's different manifestations of the same being. He talks about here, she's ignoring me. Guess this isn't the embody I met. So it lets you know, just because you have a conversation with one version of these characters, there's an infinite number of different versions of these same abstract beings that are just pieces of the real thing, if that makes sense. Because they say he probably has an infinite number of embodies, manifestation bodies, because this is an infinite multiverse. Different cosmic being for each multiverse, but they're all a part of the same cosmic true form. They even say here, what's the story with this eternity? This eternity, like it's different aspects of the same being, not the true eternity. You know what I mean? I hope all of that wasn't confusion, right? So yeah, these cosmic abstract beings are just it kind of gets crazy. This Godzilla that I'm talking about today in this video kind of dabbles in this concept. The Godzilla in the Singular Point series kind of explores some abstract existence type stuff similar to what I just talked about the Marvel abstracts and their embodies. It's kind of like a similar concept with this universe, with Godzilla being a cosmic centric type being. Like this scene kind of implies it here. They say half his substance exists in our world, the avatars of Godzilla, and then the other half exists in another world, another dimension, higher dimension, Godzilla's true self. That's what they imply here. Matter of fact, throughout this video, when I'm explaining the powers and the versatile stuff Godzilla can do, these are technically not its true self, technically. But just like manifestations, like how the Marvel and DC characters do, like I pretty much explained already. Like a lot of the stuff is not even going to be his true self. These are like super duper bare minimum feats. When I'm showing like we technically haven't, as the viewer, we technically haven't seen this version of Godzilla's true form because it's too big, or its glory is too big for this universe to handle. So a lot of the features you're going to see throughout this video is going to be manifestation bodies, or one could say avatars of his true self manifesting in our universe, in the universe. So in this video, when you see images of him like this isn't his true self. This isn't his true self. Neither is this. You see what I'm saying? Keep all this stuff in mind when I'm showing you feats of these versions of Godzilla's that he, the different avatars of himself that evolve. So if you see feats from stuff like this, just keep note that this is ridiculously lowball compared to what his true might is, considering these are just big little shadows of himself. They even use metaphors in this universe when it comes to talking about his true glory. They talk about shadows. I think this guy in the show pretty much analyzed it pretty good when it comes to what we're talking about Godzilla's true form. Like, he talks about, like, he's using this cube as an example. If I'm understanding this correctly, the show explained, like, the archetypes of how the different essences of this being can't merge with each other. They talk about how we as mere mortals can only see its shadow in this world. Red dust, one of the versatile abilities Godzilla can use, and I'm going to bring up again later on in this video, perceive this as us mere mortals. We perceive this as something as red dust, one of his versatile abilities. We perceive it that way, but it's actually more complex than that. We think that the red dust is just a versatile ability he's producing, when it's really just Godzilla's essence being shown in different ways. It looks like a different material to us mere mortals when it's really not. We only see the shadow in our real world, so it looks like a different material to us when it's actually not a different material. It's the same being, same Godzilla, just at a different angle, so it looks like something completely different for our mortal eyes to comprehend. Like, when they're describing metaphors, they even use the word, like in this Japanese, I'm going to translate it for you real quick. They give examples of him being a higher dimensional being. When stuff like this is translated higher dimensional, the best way I can explain it for you to really understand what I'm talking about is to look at the mere mortal or human characters of the verse. This is the best visual analogy I can give you guys. This is kind of what they're kind of describing Godzilla. Like, as us people on a table, the whole universe, we're all within the universe. Godzilla's just this beast outside of space and time, looking down on you, the true self we never see, looking down on you like you're a piece of drawing or a piece of paper on a table. And the only Godzilla that we interact with in our universe is shadows of his true self. So the Godzilla we do see the characters interact with is just a shadow of this being that we haven't seen yet. The avatar we see, the one destroying cities, producing red dust, it all goes back to him at the end of the day, higher dimensional being. This also leads back to the fact that killing this is pretty much pointless because the true him is still here. You see where this is going? All this higher dimensional stuff kind of leads into the reason why he has versatile abilities and stuff. Like in this example, this scene in the show said it burned to death, but it revived. You see, this higher dimensional stuff kind of is the reason why he can do higher dimensional type or weird stuff or unfathomable type stuff like resurrecting itself and stuff, because it's the avatar of himself. It's not really like, of course he can resurrect himself. It's only just a shadow that we're seeing. There's even points in the show where the avatar of Godzilla that's in our universe will grow the more it's closer to a thing known as a singular point, which is apparently a veil in this universe that is weaker. So now that I've said all that, doesn't this picture make a little bit more sense now? Or how the universe itself is basically like something on a table compared to Godzilla looking down on it like a little piece of fiction. This brings me into some more cosmic being type talk real quick. Let's think of it like this. You guys know how Stan Lee's the writer of Marvel Comics or certain Marvel characters, right? He's the writer, right? You know how there's a difference between real life and fiction? Like, Stan Lee is obviously a real being and this fiction is fiction. It's fake, not real. But there's still super powerful beings in these fictional universes or multiverses and stuff. This is why I want to get into the 3-dimensional and 4-dimensional talk. Think of the strongest beings in the Marvel multiverse or omniverse. No matter how many levels of infinite power these beings get, there's nothing they can do, even if you're the one above all, there's nothing they can do that can ever make them actually be strong enough to hurt a real life being. They can never hurt a real life being, no matter how powerful they are in fiction. This is the higher dimensional stuff I'm talking about. Like, think of this concept when it comes to 4-dimensional beings and 3-dimensional beings. There's a ridiculous gap in power between a 3-dimensional being and a 4-dimensional being. A 3-dimensional being can have infinite power, but that infinite power still wouldn't be able to match a 4-dimensional being infinite power. You see what I'm saying? And you know how Marvel and stuff, they have like higher dimensional characters. But like, no matter how higher dimensional those characters get, they could never hurt a real life being like Stan Lee. Does that make sense? This is the difference between 4-dimensional and 3-dimensional beings like that, higher dimensional beings. Remember this example I brought up? They state he's a higher dimensional being. That's what I mean when I say higher dimensional being. They pretty much imply in the show that Godzilla, his true might, is a higher dimensional being. I believe the show purposely makes some of this stuff ambiguous so we can kind of like speculate ourselves. But there's implications. They're referring to a god of like an actual god of the universe. Obviously, a lot of this stuff wasn't completely explained, but like metaphorically speaking, this technically adds up to what I've been always talking about, like throughout this video. There's a god that's bigger than the universe itself, and a god that can start over the universe, which will further go back to the fact about him being a higher dimensional being. No matter how strong these lower dimensional beings get, no matter if they're omnipotent in their multiverse, they would never be able to hurt something that's real life. That's kind of a similar analogy when it comes to Godzilla's true form. Looking at everybody on a table in the universe, making an avatar of himself, interacting with these humans in this universe, that's kind of what it seems. And when you think about it, that's pretty terrifying, thinking about our universe being little compared to a beast that could literally swallow us up. It's even talked about how history itself might get rewritten. There's been points in the show where they talk about bending the laws of physics, breaking the laws of physics down to everything they thought they knew about the world was pretty much being messed up by the idea of Godzilla. Miracles, his shadow invalidates the laws of this world. It's little statements like this that imply he's above the concept of time itself, using big words like transtemporal phenomenon, twisting space and time to stop it. But yeah, for now, even though he's technically a higher dimensional being, let me go over his shadow for a little bit in this video. Or one could say his avatar that we see majority of the time. We don't even really technically see this one at all, really. Go over some feats he does in this universe. Then I'm going to bring this up back later on, like his true self. Godzilla Singular Point is a series I just got done binge watching on Netflix, by the way. It's an anime-ish Godzilla show, basically, that's very short. Since this is an anime take on Godzilla, I would say that he's definitely not your conventional Godzilla, I would say, in this anime universe. But at the same time, he still has a lot of things about Godzilla we still know and love. A great example of him having his famous, sheer size. He's ridiculously huge. One of his versatile abilities is Godzilla creating this red dust and making stuff like this happen. It can affect people's health. That's why everybody got to wear masks. Not only messes up the view, but it also absorbs radio waves. But he also has his famous mouth blast type of attacks. Like, that's something we're used to Godzilla having in any universe, really. Like proving he has straight on blast power through his mouth. That's a common Godzilla thing when it comes to him having blast power in any universe, right? Being able to melt through buildings and stuff. So right off gate, you already know this Godzilla can easily destroy buildings. Without even relying on blast, he can level buildings based on his sheer size, one could say. In weaker forms, different modes, evolutions, he does this to buildings, when it's just by accident, stuff like that. I mean, this is technically with laughable ease. What version of Godzilla do you know that can't destroy buildings? I mean, this is easy. Most Godzillas are even the size of buildings, so him leveling buildings, that should be like a no duh. And it's a fair assumption to assume his body is durable enough to withstand just like what he can blast out when beings try to blast him. He can make a shell around himself, layer himself for extra durability if needed. So if you shoot him with stuff that can level buildings, it's not going to necessarily cut it. He has reactive armor, rapidly generated tissue appearing to burst on impact to buffer the shock. So he can make himself armor to increase his durability. Its tissue changed before it was hit. More than likely has a decent healing factor, if we're being honest. If he can generate tissue out of the blue and stuff, it makes sense. When it comes to the straight up energy Godzilla can produce, we've seen him produce forces way worse than just buildings shattering, if we're being honest. Like all this energy, for example, like this big explosion, this big. They even gave us numbers for us watchers of how big this was. This is like a mini nuke, one could say, like a very small baby version of a nuke. They say 500 meters he produced of an explosion. And it doesn't seem to be an exaggeration when we see visuals like this. Making explosions like this pretty much proves he could easily level multiple buildings with his kind of blast power or energy projection he can produce. I mean, in this particular occasion, he's literally just evolving or transforming, and you could just see the energy being put out is monumental. This much energy being put out, like making his own storm, looks like it seems. Based on scenes like that, it's pretty obvious he can pretty much shake a city to its core. In this weaker state, not even in his prime avatar state, not even in his max evolved state, he can cause this kind of damage. So whatever he can do like this, his higher evolved states can do better, like Godzilla Ultima. Forms like this, his blaster energy output should be able to do better. He was causing so much widespread destruction. People was like, did he cause all that damage by itself? Like, I'm pretty sure he can level mountains with this kind of energy he can produce. He produced over 1,000 regional earthquakes within an hour. I mean, all this stuff happened within Tokyo. He was just producing all this energy around this area. Like, their Tokyo seems to be similar to our real life Tokyo. I think without much effort, he could definitely level small cities. Mountains would definitely tremble in his path. Yeah, it was a theme having all this red dust everywhere. So yeah, it was a lot of it. And when it comes to his raw blast power mixed with this being he was fighting, you can see the area, like with all this red dust around Tokyo, get dispersed, which gives more implications that he's kind of like his own walking nuclear bomb, if we're being honest. But when it comes to this Godzilla, one thing is for sure is that it did go through some evolutions throughout the series when we did see his physical body. Think of him evolving, growing in power as time went by. Not to mention there's other kaiju in this universe. So basically, If you was watching the series on Netflix and you was confused on who these different creatures was, some of these creatures were actually different creatures, but some of these creatures were actually Godzilla, just in different states. Like, this is his, like, aqua-ish state. We see him get different states with different looks. Eventually starts looking like a Godzilla to what we're kind of used to seeing him look like. Eventually, as a higher dimensional being, it makes sense that he will be versatile. I mean, you would technically feel like you're versatile if you can affect the universe just from existing, or part of your full glory just kind of existing. Just part of the reason why he can create earthquakes and such. So yeah, overall, he's just strong, no matter if you're fighting his shadow, his avatar, smaller emanation of himself, but his true self, there's implications he's even scarier, and that he can literally eat all of this, like, he literally eat the universe. I mean, this should be like pretty basic understanding, but his true self, like when it comes to true Godzilla, the one that exists outside of space and time, a higher dimensional Godzilla, it's pretty obvious he can destroy an entire planet. They talk about how he can destroy the world. This lady right here is talking about ancient beasts that are prophesized to destroy the world. So it's literally confirmed that Godzilla's true self can destroy the entire planet, the entire world. I mean, just from his sheer size, he's a higher dimensional being. So the fact that, yeah, he's a higher dimensional being, him being able to destroy the planet is like, no duh. But just from his sheer size, if he's actually bigger than the universe, his sheer size alone, imagine that magnitude of weight. Of course, he'll be able to destroy, like, planets. So not only can he destroy planets, but he's literally, quite literally bigger than the universe. Like, his actual true size bigger than a universe. Like, just from sheer size alone. Like, imagine what his hit at this size would feel like. It's one of them situations to where even if he's bigger than a finite observable universe, that's still insanely impressive. Like, if we're being disrespectful, universe is like more than likely most of the time infinite in size. I'm being disrespectful for this example. Even if he was just bigger than a finite observable universe size structure, that would not only mean that he's bigger than trillions of galaxies, just from his sheer size. Even if we lowball the universe and say the universe was finite, he would by default be bigger than trillions of galaxies, because the observable universe has trillions of galaxies. If it's anything like our real life universe, apparently. So even being disrespectful, he would be able to tremble trillions of galaxies. Just from his sheer size, what would his swings feel like? His swings would by default be able to destroy trillions of galaxies. What would his higher dimensional blast feel like? Being able to destroy trillions of galaxies. But the thought of it actually being an infinite universe, and he's bigger than an infinite size universe, that would definitely add on to the stuff I've been talking about earlier in this video about him being a higher dimensional being. A being that's literally bigger than the universe itself, bigger than an infinite size universe. Pretty much proving with his raw power or strikes or blast, his true self would easily be able to eat a literal infinite size universe or destroy something that's an infinite size universe. Being such a higher dimensional being, being able to destroy an infinite size universe just makes Godzilla of this universe sound scary and crazy. There's like these different points that Godzilla has to interact with in our universe, these singular points. This was like a big theme throughout this series. It's because of Godzilla to where these singular points were getting more active, and they were the reason they would trigger a catastrophe. That was the big theme of this season. If the singular points to continue to evolve, the universe would face catastrophe. The universe. I know they say world here, they mean the universe. Wiping out the universe from existence and crap. Yeah, they straight up say Godzilla destroying the universe in the show. He's a being whose full glory should not exist in our world. If it does, the world itself or universe will perish. Higher dimensional, because these singular points, which he is a part of a singular point, are connected from this dimension to the next one. Higher dimension, it grows, it leads the world to destruction, catastrophe. They think the catastrophe, Godzilla will destroy the universe. The universe will face a catastrophe. These singular points connect Godzilla to this dimension. Our mortal brains can't comprehend a four-dimensional being, a higher dimensional being. So we start asking questions like, how many eyes does a creature that live in a four-dimensional space need? You see what I mean? Like the different human characters of the show, analyzing the different stuff about Godzilla. Not to mention the laws of physics in our tiny universe, Godzilla, like they pretty much state, he pretty much transcend all the laws we're used to. When we're talking about his true form, they mention here 4D space. There's like literal materials that transcend this world. Godzilla, not of this world. It defies the laws of physics. When super scientific people of the show are talking about this type of stuff or these anomalies, this type of stuff can get a little confusing. Yeah, I don't know who wrote the script of this. The writers of this script must have been like some mathematicians or something. But they quote stuff like maybe each eye is a universe of its own and a singular point. This could imply that they're talking about Godzilla's like actual might. Did you guys know this Godzilla of this show was so strong? The show's a little confusing and isn't my favorite type of Godzilla show, but you would be surprised when you deep dive into this lore. This Godzilla is kind of crazy. Will they get a season 2 to plug in some holes to understand the dimensionality and all this cosmic stuff a little bit more? Who knows? I just think it's interesting that there's a Godzilla out there whose eyeballs or eyes they say are bigger than universe or are comparable to actual universes and stuff. I just think that's kind of crazy. God of destruction type stuff. The Godzilla we see is the shadow. His true self is the one we never seen, which is a scary threat to think about. The idea of somebody being bigger than an infinite sized universe really shows the different layers of infinity beings can have in power. If Godzilla exists in a higher dimensional plane, how big is the dimension he's in? What's his limits? Could he mess up 2 universes? I don't see no reason why he wouldn't be able to mess up a whole bunch of different infinite sized universes if the dimension he is in completely transcends everything we thought we knew about physics. Surpassing infinite levels of power seems like redundant, and it seems like that shouldn't be possible, but you got to remember this is like a constant thing. Marvel Comics does this kind of stuff too, how there's plenty of beings with literal limitless power. I'm talking about not even exaggerating. Like, for example, this being has limitless power, this being has limitless power, but yet there's still beings above beings that have limitless power. Because of the example I brought up earlier about how no matter how strong these abstract beings get, they can never hurt the actual real writer, Stan Lee, for example. Like they're fake, he's real. Even though they have limitless power, their limitless power could never match and actually hurt a real life human. You see what I mean? That's the different levels of infinity I'm kind of talking about. Or how even in the Marvel universe, there's beings that have limitless power, but they still can't compare to the one above all. You see what I mean when I say there's different levels of infinity? You can actually surpass infinity. That's mind-boggling to think about. But that's kind of how this higher dimensional Godzilla is. Quite literally bigger than an actual infinite-sized universe. But what do you guys think? Before I get going though, respect this Godzilla. He's kind of overpowered, ain't he? Singular Point series. Thanks for the donations, everybody. Helps out a lot. I'm glad you are enjoying your time on the channel. Make sure you check out the playlist on the channel to see other How Strong videos. If you like what this channel is offering, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys later.